Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. I'm here today with Rafael Alcarez, who brings extensive experience on marketing and analytics from companies such as Facebook, Indeed, Kellogg's, Hershey's, and those are just to name a few companies. And today we're going to be speaking about how the pandemic has changed the way businesses seek to really leverage their data. So welcome to the show, Rafael. I'm excited to speak with you today.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate you inviting me to talk to you about this important topic.
Yeah. And could you tell the audience just more about your background and what you're doing?
Absolutely. So you mentioned my name and you mentioned some of the companies that I work for, but at the core, I'm a trained econometrician, which sometimes surprises folks when I tell them that I'm a marketer, but my core background has been in analytics. And I have actually used that sort of background to really help me bring to light and to help companies drive better revenue monetization practices through marketing. But at the core, I love data, I love information, and it's all about getting the right information in the right place.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. And what are some ways the pandemic has really affected these businesses since this past year? I know it's been a very crazy year for many people, individuals, families, work, and a lot of businesses. How has it really been affecting the leverage that we data and the insights we can find? And how is this affecting stronger brand equity and loyalty?
Wow, that's a lot of questions in one particular swoop question. But the way that I think about the pandemic and what I've seen so far with Facebook at the beginning of this whole craziness is that companies really, nobody was prepared for what's happening, right? We were not prepared personally, and we were not prepared from a business standpoint. The reliability on conventional and traditional ways of analyzing data were there. And the challenge on that is that the pandemic really created pressure on organizations to really understand their distribution systems, logistics, to understand the customer better. And then the customer changed their whole approach to how they were consuming products or services. And that created another layer of challenge. And so what we have seen is that the companies that were prone to be able to move away from, if there was a product that it was a brick and mortar product and move to the e-commerce, those companies who were more nimble and were prepared to really understand the customer needs were the ones that have been so successful. And those are the ones that have strengthened post-pandemic, or I guess we're not post-pandemic quite yet, but we're in a better stage that we were a year and a half ago. Those are the companies that are really strengthening their brand equity, and they're really coming up on the higher end. But those companies, they really have to focus on putting the customer first.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with the insight that you brought here. And how have you upskilled your data-oriented team during this pandemic, since a lot of it has been, I'm sure, work from home?
Absolutely. I think it's been a challenge. It was a challenge in the beginning because the sense of community from a team building perspective, it has always been, everybody loves to have that sort of a personalization, right? To have that socialization, to be in person, it's easier. But I think you have to be more intentional. That's number one when it comes to meetings and to be able to communicate things that are a little bit more challenging, specifically in the space, Catherine, of data and insights. It's very difficult to communicate complex things remotely. Right, so you have to make an adjustment in there. The good thing is the teams that I work with have been always very smart, always hire people that have multiple different backgrounds that could leverage themselves to be able to explain one another potentially what is it that we were trying to accomplish and how we would do it in a very quick way, because the time to drive these insights and to drive action, it was very short. The pandemic was actually creating a lot of needs for many businesses, and it's B2B, B2C, and you start to now layer the different tiers in here, and it creates a little bit of a challenge. But the most important thing is when you look at some of these opportunities later on, hopefully the pandemic doesn't repeat itself, but companies where they're looking to hire talent, I think it's important to hire talent, not just for the now, but for the future, and to hire diverse talent in terms of their needs, their backgrounds, their understanding, how they communicate with each other. That's super important, and that's what really makes you stronger at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the pandemic has really taught us a lot of different things of team building, even from a remote environment, and just being able to communicate really effectively and not waste time in a lot of these Zoom meetings or team meetings that we do, definitely. And how do you leverage data to have a customer-centric mindset or view of the businesses you support?
It's a great question. And I think that what I have done over the past several years is in many organizations that I work for, I started to kind of rethink the whole funnel. And at the end of the day, if you think about organizations, they're really trying to drive a common metric, which is revenue in the end, right? And so if you really focus on that revenue, is how are you going to get to that revenue number through marketing or insights and whatever the other functions in the organization are helping you do in a way that is going to put the customer first. And I think if you have a customer first mindset, that's key. So what I have done is to build a construct that starts the whole planning and the whole process by understanding your customer base. And the data that you need in that particular situation is going to depend on the industry or depends on the type of company you're working for. If it's a product versus a service versus an app install, software as a service, as an example, they're going to be different. But in the end, it's really understanding the needs and the wants of your customer base. And you actually create a little bit of a different narrative and approach to service those needs in a little bit more of a bespoke manner to fulfill those particular needs of each of the customers. So the first thing is driving and building information sets that allow you to have that clear understanding of your customer. And then everything else builds on that. You start to work now on your attraction, your conversion, your delighting, your engagement, and then the analysis comes later on.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds great. And how do you think businesses will really leverage all of their data, even post-pandemic, since I'm sure there might be some changes throughout this process?
We're still kind of figuring things out. I think the companies who have done really well are those companies who were nimble and they put the customer first, as we discussed earlier on in our conversation. But I think in general, it's going to create a little bit more of a sensitivity around that element of quickness, how nimble you are. Are you able to really put together different data sets to drive insights that are going to allow you to make decisions faster? Fulfillment versus supply chain versus delivery, shipments, the ability for you to really satisfy a specific cohort or segment of your customer base. Those are going to be the businesses that are going to be successful and going to continue to drive equity and build their brands. But it requires people like yourself, myself, and other folks who are in this space to really be more nimble and to have those sort of processes and integration of the different data sets and tools and techniques along the way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rafael, I wanted to say thank you so much for being on the Data Standard Audio Experience today. It was so great to hear more about your work and just really talking about things during the pandemic and what we see post-pandemic life will look like. In our community, we're trying to always connect people with one another and build a community in general. So what is something that we can do for you?
Just continue to network. If you have any questions about potential deeper insights in what we discussed today, feel free to reach out. Give me some time because there's a lot of busy, but I will get back to you. And just in general, the community can continue to work on figuring out ideas and thinking about ways that can be more nimble for organizations. I think there's this whole need later on post-pandemic to really build that sort of nimbleness and integration across different data sets to be able to drive those insights to improve organizations' performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can everyone find you online to connect?
Great question. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn, Rafael Alcarez. I'm there. That's the best way to reach out to me.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Rafael, for joining me today. It was so great to hear more about your experiences and all the things you're working on. So thank you so much, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
My pleasure, Catherine. Thank you for having me.